So welcome, everybody. This is our November meeting of the Fallbrook Climate Action Team. And I think most of you have been to our meetings before, but if you haven't, we're a nonpartisan group of mostly Fallbrook people who are concerned about climate change. And we generally put on a meeting on Zoom once a month on the fourth Tuesday. And but we'll be skipping next 2 months for the holidays. We're taking an extra break this year for Thanksgiving and the
Christmas.
December holidays, Kwanzaa, I think it is. And so I'd like to introduce you to our speaker this month, Mike Bullock, who's a retired engineer, and he's going to talk to us about the California Air Resources Board scoping plan and how that can help us reduce emissions in California. So take it away, Mike.
Okay, thank you. This title and the next slide really tell us where we're going to go with this slideshow. And I want to make it clear that we have a climate crisis. I present at conventions where the people are there for various reasons, and quite often they know very little about climate change. And I don't want to spare them the education that they need. So I put that in red: climate crisis leading to a requirement to reduce driving. And there's three ways to do that. Primarily, there's lots of ways to do it. You know, you can go on all day about how to reduce driving. But the three primary mitigation measures that CARB specifies, and we haven't got to CARB yet, but we will, as Joy said, is increasing transit service. It's actually doubling by 2030. Everything's 2030. And then reforming how we pay to use roads, and then reforming car parking. And just so by the way, the reforms would increase equity and transparency while they did reduce driving. And the parking reform would include solar canopies, charging, buying, selling electricity. And that's in there because when I go to a convention, they put me on a panel, and I want to kind of blend into the panel a little bit. And so that's what that box is about. Now, so really this is about reducing driving. And that's a pretty shocking sort of assertion that we actually have to do such a thing, because we're so car-centric in California, and everybody knows that. And so there's three questions that should pop into anybody's mind, and they're in the green there, 1, 2, and 3. And that's why. Why in the world would we need to reduce driving? Can't we just have electric cars? Can't we just whatever? Don't we have enough time to do this, that, and the other? Why? Why do we have to reduce driving? And then how much? I mean, are you talking about 5%? Or are you talking about 50%? I mean, it makes a big difference how much. Everything to do with climate change is about numbers. And yeah, how much is a great question to ask. And then, oh, by the way, the third question: how? How are you really going to do that? Now, to the left of these three, I give a clue as to where this presentation is actually going. The why is nothing but human-caused climate change, or anthropogenic climate change. We don't have to drive less because of climate change. The climate change is not a problem, but anthropogenic climate change, big problem. And that's exactly why we have to drive much. And we have to drive less. And then how much? Well, really, the anthropogenic climate change and what the climate scientists are telling us drives all the numbers. And so California's had to deal with that. And California's official plan to do what needs to be done, to do what? We'll get into that. How do we define solving this problem? The official plan is California's 2030 climate mandate And then the plan is the CARB scoping plan. As Joy said, it's what CARB's work has done. So that's going to tell us how much. They're going to do the math based on what the climate scientists are saying. And California's climate mandate backs that up, that nothing's pulled out of the air here. And then how, CARB had to figure that out. And so we're going to get into that a little bit. But first, we're going to really get into that anthropogenic climate change because that's driving everything. And a lot of people know this, that, and the other about climate change, but sometimes this, that, and the others are not the best approach. The California Democratic Party platform is shown here. These are statements in the education plan. And this was actually vetted by Sierra Club California's Energy Climate Committee, and then adopted by the Sierra Club California, and then it went up to the Sierra Club, the Democratic Party. When it went through the Sierra Club, then the same thing was not changed very much by the Democratic Party, but it did go from club to the county party to the state party. And anyway, all that worked many years, and here's what we got. Work to ensure that all graduating high school students are climate literate. What the hell does that mean? Climate literate. Well, we defined it. And I don't like the word including. One thing when you go through this process, you've got to eat it sometimes. Things that you really don't like, but you know that you're going to have to do that. So anyway, what is climate literacy? What was the idea there? What we were trying to do is necessary, but no more. Necessary and sufficient. And for what? For, how do you decide what's necessary? Well, we have to be able to get our legislators to do the right thing, and especially at the local level. City council people, they don't really know what to do. They're doing a climate action plan, and it's not a climate stabilization plan, as we'll see it needs to be. But anyway, so here's what climate literacy is defined as vetted by these two organizations. The reasons for climate change, and that's always in the earth science textbooks. I was going to have earth science textbooks to wave around here. I've got two. One's high school and one's community college that my wife took. So they're very similar. The community college book is very old, and the high school, it's actually a teacher's edition, and it's fairly new. And they are good. Everything in them all that information is accurate. However, they're also at the same time terrible. And the reason they're terrible is because that first bullet, they don't quite get it. They don't quite cover it. Potential for harm. Maybe we don't want to burden our high school kids with that, or I don't know the process, how they decide what's in a earth science textbook and what is not, but they sure as heck don't cover potential for harm. Now, the second bullet is very important, and it's almost redundant to potential for harm, but it's important to get more specific about potential for harm. The difference between climate stabilization and destabilization. And these have very specific meanings. We're not going to get the climate to be flat. That's stabilization. You might mean, oh, now it's not going to change anymore. That's, of course, not true at all. What stabilization really means is we're going to avoid destabilization. And destabilization is a very bad thing, and we'll get into defining that. But every person who graduates from high school certainly should know how to define that. And every person here and every person on a city council or actually voting citizens all need to know this, the difference between climate stabilization and destabilization. Now, what else? Climate's stabilizing greenhouse gas reduction targets. So now you get into the numbers. And I don't like the words targets. I would use requirements. I was a systems requirements engineer. Sometimes they call systems engineers requirements engineers. But anyway, the basis for those targets are requirements, where they come from, and the measures needed to achieve them. So there's really quite a bit here, even though, there's tons of things that aren't covered here. You could know all about things that are happening in the ocean. You could know all kinds of things, and that's great. And no problem with that. But you have to know this stuff uh, specifically. And then the primary categories of emissions, including the most problematic category, cars. I was really proud of the fact that I got that into the platform uh, because we all love our cars. Let's face it. And so here we go. So this has been called the most important scientific discovery ever. This is Charles Keeling's work, and he just went to Hawaii a lot with a balloon and collected air, and then went to a spectrum analyzer and determined it precisely what the carbon dioxide amount was. And so that's that red line. I got it covered up with these boxes here, and I'm going to get into a little bit of detail, and then we'll start going a little faster. But I do want to spend some time here. That red line is actually the running average. It is the value at specific times, but a lot of times it's not the average. It's not the value. The value is that gray oscillating up and down line that's drawn over the top, and the annual cycle. And so if I'm in a room of people, I always ask somebody if they know why that is occurring, and sometimes a hand will be raised. But anyway, the reason is because there's more deciduous trees in the northern hemisphere than there are in the southern hemisphere. And what do deciduous trees do, which is actually absolutely amazing, as all life is. I mean, life is amazing. But the photosynthesis creates those leaves. And photosynthesis, we remember, is taking carbon dioxide out of the air. Even though, look at the values over there on the right side, parts per million, hundreds of parts per million. Wow, there's not much there. There's almost nothing there. It's impossible. The leaves can't get CO2 at that low level, but oh yes, they can. They do it. They pull the CO2 out of the atmosphere, and they pull the water up from the roots. That's pretty easy to imagine that. And then what do they do with it? They put them together and get a hydrocarbon, so that and give off oxygen. And so that is important, and that leads to this word sequestration. And people use it a lot, and I guess people know what it means. I never use that word except for juries. Juries were sequestered from the general public. Well, carbon is sequestered, and what the heck does that mean? That means it's not in carbon dioxide or some other greenhouse gas in the atmosphere doing what it does there in the atmosphere. It's somewhere else. It's mostly in hydrocarbons. That's most sequestered carbon is hydrocarbon. Because if you had I always say, if you had a balloon full of CO2, it would be also sequestered because it's not in the atmosphere. It's in the balloon. If you pop the balloon, it's no longer sequestered carbon. It is the carbon dioxide. Now, so why is that curve going up, and why did they know that it was going to go up, and what did they learn? Mainly, they learned that about 20% is going somewhere else, and they figured out it's going into the ocean, making the ocean more acidic, have more CO2 in solution there. But they've done all the math, and they knew what to expect. Burning a gallon of gasoline results in about 19 pounds of CO2. Now, some people in a room full will stop me and say that's impossible because gasoline doesn't weigh 19 pounds, a gallon. And the trick there is that the hydrogen, well, the carbon, most of it, the weight is carbon, because carbon weighs a lot more than the hydrogen. So if you've got something that roughly equal hydrogen carbon, the weight is mostly carbon, and then the oxygen isn't in the gasoline, but it is in the CO2. So that's kind of how that works. A barrel of oil, about 700 pounds, a ton of coal, about 3 tons. So they know the millions of barrels per day, and they know all that stuff. And so they can compute all sorts of things that we know. So why is CO2 a greenhouse gas? What makes a molecule a greenhouse gas? I mean, actually, our atmosphere is mostly nitrogen and oxygen. So it's like 70-30 or whatever it is, and then trace elements. And the most predominant trace element is CO2, but it's parts per million. It's almost nothing. And So oxygen, that molecule is not, and most molecules are not greenhouse gases at all. And what causes that is something called the molecule's resonant frequency. And that's not hard to explain because everybody here has pushed somebody on a swing. And if you push somebody on a swing, there is a resonant frequency there, and that's a frequency that you will push the person. And I think we all know if you shorten that rope or chain, like you cut it in half, it's 4 times. So you have to push them a lot. Suspension of a car has resonant frequencies, and structures, buildings have resonant frequencies, well understood. And so it's not hard to imagine that molecules will have resonant frequencies, and that's how spectrum analyzers actually work. So we understand all of that. And so when somebody says we're not sure, well, that's when you pull out the next two curves. Now, the next two curves, I believe, are the most important scientific discoveries ever. You have to take them both together, I think. And it's just kind of the same kind of thing here. This is over decades, and this is over much longer time. And there's two plots, and one is the big one. And some people call these the Alcor plots, but really they're the NOAA plots. NOAA is, of course, National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration plots. So there's a ton of science in here because that's 800,000 years. That's not 800 years ago. That's 800,000 years ago. Our species is known to be 300,000 years old is all. Neanderthal lived through all this. And so all of this proves that my neighbor who said to me, Mike, climate's always changed. Now he was trying to educate me that we didn't really have a problem because climate's always changed. And that guy was absolutely right, 100%. And we see that. Now, what we're looking at here is temperature anomaly, and that's simply of the atmosphere. That's the atmosphere would be averaged over the entire Earth and averaged over a year. So that would be 1 point for that year. The anomaly, temperature anomaly means it's just with respect to whatever temperature you come up with, it's with respect to what we estimate the temperature would be right now without climate change. And so that's just a reference. And so the anomaly is how it differs from that reference. And so we see these values. You can see mostly through this time it's colder than it should be right now. That's 0 on the left side. That's temperature anomaly. And then on the right side we've got parts per million, and all this is very comforting and reassuring, except for just one fly in the ointment here on this plot, and that is at time 0, which darn, that's what we're living in. Things go totally haywire in a very frightening way. Now, there's 3 problems. One is that it seems to be 2 values at once. It seems to be about 280, and it's also whatever that is, 420 or 440 or some numbers, 2 numbers at the same time. So we can imagine by zeroing in on there that the 480 comes after the 280, and so that's where it actually is. So yeah, that's concerning. It's really a big number, there's another concern, and that is that slope. It seems to be infinite slope, and so whatever it is, it's really high, and that's a problem. But those problems are not anything compared to the third problem, which a lot of times isn't mentioned with this plot, but it's the thing that would scare us out of our wits more than anything else. Although, we've known that this is a horrendous problem for a long time. And that is the big scary part is that if you look over the 800,000 years, you see that the temperature anomaly with the reference that we used and the atmospheric CO2 stay in the same vicinity. There's times when they're fairly far apart, but not usually. Usually they're pretty close together. And so that's true throughout the whole 800,000 years, except for right now. And so what we know, you read this in the paper, the temperature anomaly is about 1.5 degrees centigrade. uh, and people talk about like, wow, it's really different. And yeah, 100 degrees Fahrenheit, we've seen that in the Arctic Circle. We've seen over 100 degrees Fahrenheit ocean water. How's that? That's pretty amazing. 120 degrees Fahrenheit in Canada, and so on and so forth. So we're seeing what some people would say huge impacts from this temperature anomaly, but it's nothing because 1.5 is nothing. The temperature anomaly that goes with the CO2 value that we have right now is about 15 degrees centigrade. So let me assert something without any proof. About 5 degrees centigrade will destabilize the climate and do us in. So there's good news later, but look at this, it looks totally grim. Now there's one thing that any engineer or scientists or anybody that collected this data would want to do, and that is zero in on that zero time. Uh, so because it's so peculiar, and you want to find out is when did that spike happen, and how did that spike happen, and what the heck is going on. So what we're going to look at is, instead of 100,000, so I can use my cursor here. So I think 0 to 100,000. We're going to take just 1% of that, just 1% of that distance. So just 1,000 years, almost nothing in the life of a planet, but in our lives, it's 1,000 years is kind of a long time, I guess. But anyway, so this is it. Now, in this plot, the colors have switched. I don't know why, but anyway, the red is atmospheric CO2. That scale is on the left side. You can see, yeah, it's 280. We thought that was kind of coming into 280, and there it is. It's 280, and it doesn't really change that much. It's fairly flat, so there's no spike or anything. Now, all this activity here, up and down, that's just what the sun does to us. And we get El Ninos and La Ninas, but it's really driven by variations in the sun's intensity. So that's normal. We will always see that. But something happens around this time, and coincidentally, it's at the start of the Industrial Revolution. And so when someone says, like my supervisor, Jim Desmond, he was running, and the Union Tribune brought up climate change and asked him what he thought about it. And he says, "Oh, I'm on board. I know the climate is changing. There's no doubt the climate's changing. I'm just not sure we're causing it." And that's what he said. Now, he said that he had a degree in electrical engineering. That happens to be my first degree. And he'd been a mayor. He'd flown a plane. He was had a high school degree, I'm sure. Had been out of middle school. All the earth science textbooks would tip him off, but Jim was not quite educated enough to know fully. And this happens all the time. J.D. Vance said in his debate, he said, just for discussion's sake, let's assume that carbon dioxide causes climate change, just for discussion's sake. Now, his opponent should have pointed out how misleading that was, and what an ignorant sort of statement that was. And certainly the moderators should have. No one said a word about that. J.D. Vance got away with that completely. Just imagine, just for discussion's sake, that CO2 causes climate change. Let's see, what else do I want to show here? You notice the blue is going up, but it goes up and down, and so that fools people. You might have a decade where it's cooler, and so on and so forth. And I just point out here, we must make this slope go to zero. That's the first thing we got to do. So this is why we have to drive less. I mean, we've gone into some detail, and I keep these plots in. I have one larger piece of paper in my back hip pocket, but I do show it. I always wear this pin. I don't know if you can see it, but it says "Unite for the Climate." I used to have one, climate voter. But anyway, I want to have discussions with people. And so these plots are foundational, and we should have them ready to show anybody that thinks, well, I don't think we're actually causing it, are we? You could show them these plots. or they say, well, it's not really that bad. And that first plot explains uh, that it's horrifying, actually. All right, so how bad could it get? I mean, here we are. Well, Governor Brown said to the Pope, and I believe this is the Pope before the Pope we have now, so the one who recently passed away, um, humanity must reverse course or face extinction. And he said that in the presence of reporters, and it was reported. And so, voila, we have this chart, we have this slide. Now, as an engineer, I can tell you that reverse course isn't very helpful at all. What he should have said is adopt sufficient mitigation measures, or we could face extinction. I mean, that's always a choice. We seem to be going that way, not because we couldn't fix the problem. We'd actually make everything work better if we would do what needs to be done. But do you think Oceanside City Council wants to do that, or Carlsbad, or Vista, or Fallbrook, or they don't even know that there is a plan to do it, and adopt sufficient mitigation measures. That work has actually been done, and you just need to do it. But do you think the Board of Supervisors wants to do that? No, I don't know any of the five who talk like they understand any of this stuff. And so we do have work to do. Okay, so continuing on with this, how bad it could get, and I could go get the magazine that had this in there. A very a person with a lot of credentials. She was highly qualified, and she was writing about this situation. And then I saw newspaper articles which were referring to the same information she was talking about, so I updated it. So from a reliable 2012 source, and then the same topic but updated. So the updates are in red. So she wrote, such a large temperature rise occurred 250 million years ago. Now the more up-to-date version said 252, not that that really matters, and extinguished 90% of the life on Earth, she wrote. The updated version that I read from also authoritative source said, no, it wasn't 90%, it was actually 97%. And then she wrote, the current rise is of the same magnitude, but it is occurring about 10 times faster. And so how bad could it get? This is sort of a suggestion here, answering that question. Okay, so and now I'm going to do something that I said I never would, and that's show extreme weather. Just because this should have been the front page above the fold headline when this was completed and came out. Now there are, what's happening here is it's ocean temperature and its surface, how they define surface, so it's only down to some depth, and it's from some lower latitude to some upper latitude, so this doesn't include the poles. Those are kind of unstable regions, so they're looking for something a little more stable. And then this is from 1979 to 23. Okay, so that's 50, 60 years. And so every year is one of these lines. And this is January, February, March, April. We got all the months here. And what's interesting about 2023 is that in 2022, they said this was going to be a hot year. The El Nino was such that they were predicting a hot year. Well, you can see they were wrong. They're always wrong. Those guys are always wrong. They said it'd be a hot year. And look at this. In January, February, March, look where it is. That's not the hottest. It's kind of hot above, generally if we looked at these, we'd find that generally speaking, the more later years tend to be up higher and so on and so forth. But lo and behold, around March, April or so, somewhere at the time, it did get to be the hottest. It was the hottest. It was, it was warmer. So now they were right. It may be, we'll see how it averages over the whole year. So it went like this, and then it went like this, it went like this, it went up here, it went like this. What can you say about this? This is a bad sign. This is extremely warm. And this was this year and the next year. And actually, 2023 was the hottest year then, and 2024 was hotter yet. I hope 2025 is not hotter yet. I hope we get a little break from this. But just how far that is was should make people drop their jaws. Nobody dropped their jaws because nobody even knew about it. I mean, it didn't even become worthy of talking about, except for some climate people. I mean, somebody showed me this, and so this is the same thing with the air. Um, Yeah, this is the atmospheric temperature, and you can see that, yeah, it broke the record by a lot in that regard also. So anyway, again, how bad could it get? Well, the Secretary General of the UN is pretty well informed, and he has his job because he's well informed. He's a smart man, and he expresses himself pretty well. Um, he didn't say hey, we got a climate crisis. He's been a little bit more explicit and a little more helpful. He says we have a code red climate emergency. Okay. And he says we're solidly on a path to an unlivable planet. And I would never think of that phrase, solidly on a path, but it's pretty clear what that means. It's going to be kind of difficult to get off that path. And especially since we're so disinterested, and we actually elected Donald Trump to make things even worse. And I don't want to get off on that, but anyway, I don't think there's zero chance. I think we do have a chance, but I don't know how it's going to work because I can't get people sufficiently interested and aware that are. I mainly focus on people that are holding office. So we are driving toward a climate hell with our foot on the accelerator. That's just kind of cute, but and it does suggest that cars are a big problem. I do have a pie chart later, but all of that doesn't mean much compared to number 4. Number 4 is by far the most important. We're dangerously close to a point of no return. And I'll have to say the other presentations that I've seen, Fallbrook Climate Action Team do, they didn't that wasn't the impression that I would get if I didn't know anything. I just was being entertained by all of the amazing information that's contained there, but it doesn't really get at some of the most important features of the situation we're facing. So anyway, so now I'm going to define climate destabilization and climate stabilization, because that's part of climate literacy. We need to actually achieve that. So climate destabilization means that there is a process, and there's several choices, but sadly, but there is some process. There is a process with a large warming potential. In other words, this process could really make things worse. But it's also caused by warming. In other words, the process it gets worse when warming occurs, but it is causing warming itself. So this starts to proceed at a rate that is large enough to perpetuate warming, even if we were to stop our emissions. And so it will continue. It will also trigger the other processes, which are also climate destabilizing. And the outcome is human habitat destruction, which sounds pretty abstract, but it really wouldn't be abstract. It would start out as super high prices in the grocery stores, and then not everybody's getting enough food to eat, and then there would be starvation, and then there would be mass starvation. So it would proceed in that way. I guess you'd have armed guards at grocery stores and around farms and things. And it's I don't like to imagine going down that road, but we are dangerously close to the point of no return, you could say. So now here's an example: permafrost melting at a sufficiently high rate. It is melting, but at a lower rate. So we have time. The climate scientists, the legitimate climate scientists that I know about, believe we still have a chance. But anyway, it's melting. But if that rate were to get too high, then we'd have a big problem because the melting releases large amounts of methane. That's CH4. And I just get a little dig in there. That happens to be what many people use to fry their eggs. It's natural gas is 85% methane, and the problem with having that in your house is that over 100 or 200 or 300 houses, it would leak at about 1 or 2%, and it's a very high. Uh, it's a greenhouse gas with a very large impact, and so calculations have been done to show that natural gas is not any better than coal. So anyway, the released methane, a very potent greenhouse gas, traps more atmospheric heat, accelerating the permafrost melting. So you can kind of see there's a positive feedback loop there, a warming feedback loop. And now climate stabilization is real easy to define. It's just avoiding climate destabilization. And that's what we want to do. We want to avoid climate destabilization. And so that's where the numbers come from to do that. Now, I want to say a little more about the climate stabilization, destabilization. In 2011, in a letter to Sandag from California Attorney General Harris, and she reappears on the scene later as vice president and our candidate. But anyway, back then, when she had a real job, she had a lot of people working for her, and she had a lot of responsibility, and she did the right thing. Lots of guts, lots of brains. Anyway, she said that in this letter, California's greenhouse gas climate mandates represent the level scientists believe is necessary to stabilize climate. Okay, so that's the mandates are there for a reason. They didn't just want to make people's lives miserable. They didn't want to control people. They wanted to support human survival. That's really what they wanted to do. And they are official policies of California. Everybody forgets about them, and most people don't talk about them. But they are official policies of California designed to meet the environmental objective under CEQA, which is climate stabilization. Sandag cannot ignore them, and court rulings agreed. The board of directors of Sandag, they were outraged that she would actually follow through. She wasn't just bluffing. She actually filed suit against them. Anyway, there's a conclusion here. Neither municipal governments nor metropolitan planning organizations like Sandag can legally ignore California's climate mandates and the official plan to achieve them. Not legally. But of course, unless they get sued, and unless the public knows something about it, CEQA projects must include the official plan mitigation measures if they're applicable. So anyway, that's where we are. Now, I want to talk a little bit about fixing the problem and what we're doing here. And so we got to stabilize the value of the Earth's atmospheric CO2. In other words, that slope has to go to zero. That's the step one. And we have to do that by 2030. And that's why we need some pretty significant reductions, but it's not as bad as you might think. We're lucky in some ways. So on the left side of this relationship, I have CO2 emissions, and one is just natural. It happens, so it's kind of background. Rotting, fire, digestion, respiration, all of those things emit CO2. And then there's anthropogenic, human cause. So that's combustion of fossil fuels and so on and so forth. So they get added together. And then there's something which I sort of invented, and that's emission warming feedback. So we'd like to see that be small, a small number. The boxes are all the same shape, but they can have different values. And so we can only work on the anthropogenic, get that smaller. And so now we have to compare that with what's going on, which is going to help us solve this problem. And that's sequestration, and that's primarily the growth of plants on the Earth. And so we could have a positive slope as we have now. And we want to get that to be a zero slope. And so what's nice is we don't have to get our anthropogenic emissions to be zero. In California, 2030, our climate mandate is no higher than 40% below what we emitted in 1990, which we also emitted again I believe 2019 or so. So, so I say if anthropogenic emissions were sufficiently low, 80% below 1990 levels has been allocated to industrialized countries, the slope would be zero, thus capping the value. So it doesn't go up any further. We're still in enormous trouble. I mean, if we get this capped and it's 420, 440, 480, remember what the temperature anomaly is going to go to. It's headed upward. So we got to turn this around. Um, the good thing is that the temperature anomaly moves slowly enough to give us a chance. It's not a big chance, not a good chance because 2030 is so soon. And that is a stabilization requirement by itself. People talk about net zero by 2045, and I, I wish they wouldn't much because uh, the 2030 is about 1,000 times more important because it's bearing down on us. And so there's things we have to do by 2030. And actually, if we get done what needs to be done by 2030, getting to net zero by 2045 would be a piece of cake. So anyway, these are kind of the numbers. This is California climate mandates, SB 32 and AB 1279. And so this was the original S305. So this is back around 2005. It had yeah, 2010, 2020, and 2050. So that's why it's S3. S is for Governor Schwarzenegger's last name, S, and then 3 because there's 3 targets, and then '05 because that was in 2005. So things have changed a little bit. We've moved this down, and 2030 is there. And then we've also had to change this. Basically, we weren't doing enough. We were learning more, and so things have gotten worse since 2005. But net zero by 2045. This is that promised pie chart, and yeah, cars and light duty trucks are 41%. That's the largest category. And electricity, we're on a good path there. And Tom English likes to talk about that. Electricity, 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 electricity. But you know what? The big problem is cars. And because in 2030, we're going to have a lot of internal combustion engine cars, mostly on the road. So anyway, the CARB scoping plan is California's official plan to achieve its climate mandates, which we just saw. SB 32 is the most important because that is 2030. You can go to that link there. And from page 4 of Appendix E, here's what it says. Remember how we started? Less driving? How much? How? We're getting into the how much and how. So what it says is there, zero emission vehicles are not enough to solve the climate crisis, contrary to popular belief. They're not enough. Absolutely necessary. We need to electrify real fast. Faster is better. No doubt about it. But it won't be fast enough by 2030. When you solve these, and I've solved all this myself, and I presented papers, and I show all my work. CARB doesn't show all their work, but I know from my work they're in the ballpark. They solved the problem. I actually believe, but they say it depends on reducing per capita vehicle miles traveled, less driving. The scoping plan proposes reducing VMT basically a 25% reduction by 2030. That's pretty sobering. On the other hand, they have the mitigation measures that would do it. I believe it's the same ones that I came up with 10 or 15 years ago. And you know, if you want to do something, this is 2025, towards the end. 2030 means the end of 2030 by convention. They use the last second of the year, but that's really not too much time. And so you can talk about a lot of great things. I'm a huge supporter of transit-oriented development, as an example, and spending money on high-speed rail and doing a lot of big things, but they take time, and they take also money. But the primary, well, let's go into what it says. Appendix E, with the emphasis added, is double local transit service by 2030. So I say there's 3 primary measures: double transit service, then reform how we price the use of roads. See, pricing could be done in a couple of years if we really wanted to do it. Um, and it's the same way with car parking. We could price parking. The parking already reduces our effective wage. It also increases our rents. It
Mike, could
increases
I
everything,
interrupt you?
including food. Yeah, it's about time. I did pretty well. So what do we do
Well, I
now?
wanted to interrupt you with a question somebody had. Ronald, do you want to ask your question live?
Yeah, why do we have to reduce vehicle miles traveled if the vehicles are zero emission? Isn't that good enough?
Yeah, that would be good enough. But we're talking about 2030. And in 2030, you can't tell me that that is an assumption you can get away with. You know, when you work problems like this, you have to lay out your assumptions and what they're based on. And if you assume that by 2030 we'll have 100% EVs, you'll get laughed out of the room. You can't have an assumption that's not, unless you have measures which would actually cause that to occur. And I didn't think that was the best. I mean, all of these things are problematic. Nothing is easy. I admit that. But taking people's car keys away from them because their car happens to be a internal combustion engine car sounds like a big stretch to me. So it's a great question, and I'm sure a lot of other people were thinking that way.
Yeah, I now I
Yeah. So if we got time, we could go on. I call the proper use of the car parking systems that we need could be called managed parking. That name isn't in the scoping plan. And in fact, CARB has done a terrible job of being specific about how you're going to price. Um, they they say pricing strategies, authorizing pricing strategies is essential. We actually have to have pricing strategies. There's no, they need to be even more direct than they are, but they're pretty direct. Parking fees, dynamic fees on highway lanes, these are their words. And they point out that California employs over 200,000 people. So end the state's subsidies for employee parking. Well, if they did it the right way, you want to do it so that every employer wants to do the same thing. And why would every employer want to do the same thing? Because the employees, by a good solid majority, like it. They think it's better. So that's not easy, but that's exactly the kind of thing that that we need, because this has to, and and that's why we actually probably need a car parking vendor, somebody who zeroes in on car parking systems, you know, and then they have a vested interest in kind of taking, you know, working the problem for all kinds of parking and stuff. Um, so from Appendix D, local actions, and I had the emphasis put in red, a priority greenhouse gas reduction strategy is implement parking pricing or transportation demand management pricing strategies. So they're in the ballpark on these mitigation measures. They just haven't refined them. And so regarding car parking, so there's a few words here. People say these aren't good slides, there's too many words, but having observed CARB for over 10 years, I believe they have finally done the math and come to the correct conclusions, kind of at the top level. Although the conversion to battery electric vehicles will be very fast, and although renewable electricity in California will probably be over 80% by 2030, there will still be greenhouse gas from using electricity, and there will still be internal combustion engine cars on the roads. The 25% driving reduction CARB computes is reasonable. My report about 10 or 15 years ago came up with 32%. You may think, oh, wow, 32%, that's a lot different. But actually, it's not. It's just I can adjust the assumptions and get 25%. I think they're in the ballpark of that 25%. So if somebody wants to shoot the messenger, shoot the climate scientists, you know. Regarding car parking policy, if we value human survival and understand the political difficulties of pricing, a good interpretation of scoping plan is that it requests municipal governments to adopt an enforceable mitigation measure to procure well-managed parking for their own workers. So they get a vendor who can zero in on this and knows technology and knows how this can work. And the task is pretty easy. You have to make most of the employees happy in such a way that the parking system will spread to all places of employment, apartment complexes, shopping centers, train stations, and so on, for both on-street and off-street parking. So well managed must incorporate economic equity and social justice, and it must reduce driving. Um, so you have to be able to monetize unused parking and get people in there. If I work for a company and I have employee car parking, then I want them to maximize the money, and I want to be able to be a customer myself, but I don't want to ban anybody else from using the park, because I wanted to make as much money as possible because I get the earnings. That's the key. You manage the parking facilities for the financial gain of those for whom the parking is built. Um, so there's a little more detail. Managed parking provides earning to those for whom it's built. As I said, it's shared. It's value priced with congestion pricing, and it's fully automated. It has to be as easy to use this parking as it is to use free parking, which just means there's nothing to do. It means you go in and you park your car, and you find a space. Hopefully there'll be software to help you find the space that you want at the price you want to pay and the distance you want to walk, and can work all that out, make it easy so you don't have to drive around looking for parking, less VMT, and so as it says here, the first system would be installed by a third-party vendor. I want to say something else about the automation, so there's nothing to do. Well, how does that work? Well, I charge my Tesla in the garage, and I just push a button and it opens up the flap, and I stick the plug in. So when I go across country, I do exactly the same thing. There's nothing to do. And yes, if I want to see how much money I spent, I just look at my credit card data, and I'll see that it wasn't actually free, and that is the future of transactions in general, I think. But so a government has a climate action plan, and that needs to be part of it, and it has to be operated for the financial gain of the employees, so that the ones that drive every day at least break even. So you cannot have anybody lose money on this system. So the people that drive every day, and that would be the majority, will see a charge, and they will see an earnings, and they will see an add-in. And the people that bicycle every day will see, no charge. They're biking, and they'll see the same earnings. If they work the exact same hours, if they're the same hours, it's the same earnings. And they won't get the add-in because they don't need it. They'll be happy. It will feel like getting paid not to drive, and that's what we have to do. And this may seem like, well, where's all this money come from? The vendor has to be skilled at monetizing parking and knowing and using the data. And that scares people, of course. We have to protect privacy. We don't want to become a police state. And under the circumstances, we can't let the federal government get any data under any circumstances. Anyway, managed parking must increase economic equity and reduce driving alone to work. Now, the city of Oceanside has a bicycle pedestrian committee, and I'm pretty active there. And the chair asked me about road use charge, and so we went down that path, and they wound up adopting this resolution. Be it resolved, the Oceanside Bicycle Pedestrian supports replacing the state gas tax with a road use charge. That's very important. You got to get rid of that gas tax, because it is extremely unfair, regressive. Progressive people should not be standing for it. Somebody who makes $100 million a year pays the exact same gasoline tax on a gallon of gasoline as a destitute driver who's really buying gasoline so they don't freeze to death in their car. They're living in their car. Just as an example to show how regressive this thing actually is. the road use charge should be zero for the people of low income and so on and so forth. Anyway, it has to cover all road use costs. So the net you get from all the drivers has to cover the costs. And it has to protect the economic interests of low and middle income drivers by use of a progressive price structure that also recognizes the needs of rural drivers, and would protect privacy by requiring a search warrant to obtain location or travel information, and has built-in safeguards against unauthorized data use. So all that's important. Would include an instantaneous congestion pricing algorithm. So that's government should not be letting our freeways bog down. I mean, people have to go to the hospital. People have to, your neighbor has a stroke. You jump on the freeway and it's, oh darn, it's rush hour, stop and go. So that should not be accepted. So there would be a instantaneous congestion pricing algorithm. It would ensure that the per mile price incentive to drive energy efficient cars would still be sufficient. So this goes back to the question we got from Ron Martin. We need to get people to adopt battery electric vehicles very fast. And so if this road use charge slows that down, then you have to adjust it. You got to bend over backwards for people that are driving the electric vehicles to get other people to drive electric vehicles. So that is a consideration. There's also relief for people who live out in the country. They drive more vehicle miles traveled. You want to give them some relief. I don't know if that got in here, but would ensure, number 6 is because it's the Bicycle Pedestrian Committee. And so there is
Could
that.
we take a break, Mike, and see if there are some questions?
Oh,
I'm
absolutely.
not sure how many slides you have left.
But... we're really to the end. I'm amazed. Let me see. Questions or comments? I think that's,
okay, there we go.
That's the next one. So
right.
I could say a little bit more about this, but are there questions or comments? That'd be great. If not, I could point out something which isn't real obvious, and I just gloss over it, and I haven't filled it out what's needed. But if you'll notice, this is a road use charge, RUC. Let me point to the words here. It's a road use charge pricing and payout system. Well, wait a minute. It's two things. It's a pricing system. And all of this is about the pricing system. I haven't said a word about the payout system. And the payout system is exactly what Todd Gloria needs to figure out, and everybody else that is a part of a municipal government, the county government. And that is, how come we have a bunch of roads that we're supposed to maintain, and the people that use those roads, they don't pay us a penny. They pay a gas tax, which is a state gas tax. So California gets some money. They get money when people drive on the city streets. It doesn't have to be that way. We have something called technology, and it's a system where it's a GPS, and GPS knows very well if it's on. Well, let me just say by example. Let's say I jump on my Tesla and I'm driving around in Oceanside. Oceanside gets some money. I drive around in Carlsbad. Carlsbad gets some money. I drive up to where Todd Gloria has responsibility, the city of San Diego, and I drive around on those roads, and then Todd gets that money. I drive around on the state route, state route 78, any state route, and the state gets the money. I drive around on the federal road, I-5, and who gets that money? That's interesting because this is a California road use charge. I suggest we use it for transit or something. We divide it up among the municipal governments, or maybe we give it to municipal governments in which the I-5 lies and the interstate lies. And, it'd be nice to peel off some money for mass transit, since we have to double service. We know that, and everything costs money. So anyway, that's not in this resolution. The resolution just sort of glossed over this. It's a pricing and a payout system. And then all this is about pricing. And guess what? There's a whole other thing to this because it's a payout system.
We have another question from Ronald. Ronald, would you like to ask that?
Oh, great. Thank you, Ronald.
Mm-hmm.
Well, would electric cars create more wear on the roads because they have such heavy batteries. They have to have more heavy-duty tires, so they would create more road wear. But then, will they have less use charge because they have less wear in the atmosphere? So the wear in the atmosphere would be included, or how would that work?
No, you bring up valid points. And this system, it's not really my job to design the system. Um, my job is to specify what the system needs to accomplish. And what it needs to accomplish is climate stabilization. Um, the details are need to be done by a systems engineer. I mean, and the requirement. So you're talking about a requirement that says heavy cars like and battery electric vehicles, I guess, are a little heavy. Although those engines weigh a lot. But I guess what you say, I've heard it before. I think it's true. So based on that, they would pay more. But based on the harm to our health, they would pay less. And so there are many considerations. And I'm not saying that I've designed all the details. These are the kind of considerations. What you've brought up and what everybody can think of. They're all considerations, and they need to go in. They need to result in a requirements document. So the requirements document would be what this system does, and then it wouldn't really be too hard to do it. I don't think the technology is so difficult with GPS, and we all use navigational units and navigational systems, and we understand they know exactly where we are, which is the fundamental technology that would drive this road use charge.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Mike. Does anybody have any other questions or comments? If you would like to have the slides, I posted them on the chat where it says climate on transportation.
Right.
Um,
And you'll see the very first slide does have all my information. If you go back there, it's got, here's Mike Bullock. And so there's my email and my phone number. So you can text me or call me, or if you have any comments, or you want slides from me rather than that source, or you want some background material, or you want links to the CARB scoping plan, or any of those things.
And so Harriet and John Livingston both had comments too. Did you want to say those out loud in case some people can't read the chat?
Yeah, I just looked online and it said that EVs were about 300 or 400 kilos, which is about 1,000 pounds more heavier than a regular car. And I've read that electric EVs basically blow through tires really fast, and that there's a lot more pollution with on the roads, with little tiny bits of rubber being shed from the tires of EVs, because they're basically just heavier.
Yeah, I think they're heavier. I got my Tesla, our Tesla. My wife and I decided to buy a Tesla in the very end of 2020. So, but it's a 2021 model, but we got it in December of 2020, and we've replaced 2 of the 4 tires. So they wear out, that's for sure. And tires are expensive these days. But I'll tell you something. It is just astounding how there's no service charge. I've owned internal combustion cars, and you buy a brand new internal combustion engine car, and in 6 months you get this thing, time for routine maintenance, and you take it in, and it's $1,000 or something, and then it's the inconvenience, and it's the driving, and it's just kind of messes up your day, and you Joan wants me to do it. I want Joan to do it. It's your car. No, it's your car. So that's the way it was. And we didn't think much about that. But when we got the Tesla, after 6 months or a year or something, we said, hey, wait a minute, this is different. Nothing wears out. And the reason that nothing wears out is because you didn't buy anything. Electric cars are just, there's nothing there. We got 4 motors. We could have done 2, but we got a motor for each wheel. So I guess there's an axle in there, but basically there's no axle, transmission, differential, carburetor, gas tank. But there's such a long list of things, and they all need maintenance. And so it is a far superior technology in my view. It's not that there's no drawbacks, but when we went to Kona and rented an internal combustion engine car after driving our Tesla for about a year, I got in the car and I could not believe how bad that thing operated. I mean, I pushed on the gas and the thing shuddered, and also it swayed all over the place. It's shockingly bad technology compared, and it reminds me of cathode ray tube televisions. I don't know if anybody's bought a cathode ray tube television lately, but I'm joking. But it's better. The digital televisions are just a better technology. After they came up to speed and the price got reasonable, they just shut down the cathode ray tube televisions that we loved for so many decades. We thought they were just absolutely wonderful, and turned out that they were kind of a joke. Now, there's a lot of bad things said about electric cars, and I think we can see the huge economics of this situation. There are people who are always looking to buy a new car and which way they're going to go. And a lot of people say, well, I think I'll buy an internal combustion engine car, but this will be my last one probably. And I think to myself, that's not a really good idea just for your quality of life. And when I look at the charges, when we drive to Berkeley a lot, but we've driven to Seattle and down to Texas and all around. There's plenty of charging stations, all this stuff. The Tesla takes care of you. The navigational unit will, give you choices about charging. Running out of electricity is not a choice it's gonna go with. It will pester you to do the right thing always.
We have one other comment here about highway trucks.
Okay,
John,
good.
do you want to?
This is John. I'm a retired civil engineer, and when we did pavement design, we used a conversion of big trucks to cars. 1,000 cars equals one big highway truck. You didn't address how this whole thing address highway trucks, and can you comment on that for a little bit?
Yeah, for one thing, if we look at that pie chart, that according to the pie chart, went by it, the cars and light duty trucks are 41%, and the on-road transportation is 46%. So in terms of vehicle miles traveled, greenhouse gas emissions, that's what this is. This is about greenhouse gas emissions. But there's no doubt, I agree with Ron's point that it's perfectly reasonable to charge as more for more weight. More weight should be charged more because it wears the road out more. And so trucks are way up there, in what they do to the roads. I was at a Sierra Club California convention, and I mentioned road use charge, and the person that was visiting us was an assemblyman, and he said, "You're right." This was a long time ago too. He said, "You're right," and the trucks believe that's true also. The reason is that truckers want the roads to be maintained, and so we're not doing that very well. And the gas tax, of course, I guess everybody, I didn't mention this, but of course it's not paying enough to maintain the roads. That's why Todd Gloria is so frustrated because the state doesn't give him enough of the gas tax, and he's stuck. He has responsibility. People run for local office. They say, elect me and I'll pave your roads for you. And how are they going to do that? Well, they're going to cut out something which is really more appropriate for general funds, and they're going to cut out, I don't know, education, or what are they going to cut out to do that? And it should be, but your point is well taken about trucks. I didn't say much about it, and it's they are an issue, and they seem to be electrifying pretty fast. The last convention I went to is in Dallas. There was a lot of talk about the trucks electrifying and the charging stations. That was a big deal. Where were they going to put these charging stations, and how were they going to get the power in that location, and so on and so forth. So there are people thinking about it.
Okay,
Not me very much.
Okay, we want to thank you for taking the time to share your slides with us today and your explanations. I think it was very educational for all of us, and we'll have it on our YouTube.
Well, thank you very much, Joy. That means a lot to me, because I know that people here have seen a lot of presentations and know a lot, that you're concerned, and with that concern comes seeking knowledge and so on and so forth. So I'm happy to hear that I may have contributed still to people's understanding of these problems.
Okay, well, we'll see y'all back in January then.